so excited to be here with you all today to celebrate the power of storytelling across different media with these talented panelists.
Yeah. And we're a little biased, but we do think this is one of the coolest panels at Comic-Con today. We were talking about it. These are the people that are truly thinking outside the box. So if you're looking for artistic inspo today, this is it. Aparna had a good word for it. What'd you say yesterday?
I called it the Wild West of storytelling.
Yeah, so welcome. Should we jump right in?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. So let's start with Rebecca, all the way down there. Hi. As the executive producer of ArtClass, you work closely with agencies and brands to make their vision come to life. Can you tell us more about the branded content side of storytelling and how ArtClass works and differentiates itself? In particular, though, I am curious about the writer's room approach you sometimes take.
Yes, absolutely. So when we're working with brands and agencies on the content side, we're often forced to live within really specific rules. We're coming into something that's been well established way before we're involved. So while we do traditional commercials, quite often the characters that y'all recognize, like Jake from State Farm and things like that, we developed a writer's room so that we can work with brands directly to help develop that from the jump, as opposed to just bringing our directors in after an idea is already pretty much fully baked. So they're able to provide creative services from the very beginning, so it's coinciding with things like target audience, budget ranges, and of the like, and also what channels is going to be living on, everything from broadcast to TikTok. So we've been able to provide a lot more than just directorial services, which is often what gets pigeonholed in the commercial space.
Nice. Yeah, I recommend you check out their Instagram. It's like a mood board of inspiration.
Yeah, we do some really cool stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, on that note, talking about developing someone's vision, we'd love to take it over to JP. You have spent the last 13 years working on Conan O'Brien's late night shows, helping celebrities and comedians craft their stories, doing interview segments, and stand-up performances.
Yep.
Yeah, so how do you navigate diving into someone's headspace to tell stories and content in their voice as opposed to yours?
Oh, that's the key. Is that there's sort of a three-step process we do with all of our guests, whether they're interviews or they're stand-ups. We do a lot of digging through either their material, or we have a researcher actually dig through like every article that's ever been written, because we're trying to find new stories to tell, because the late night landscape is so oversaturated that we don't want to repeat stories, or we don't want to repeat jokes. And so that's the first step. Second step is actually getting on the phone with them or sitting down with them and interviewing them for, I don't know, 30, 40, 50 minutes, and just trying to find stories that, like, maybe some things don't go anywhere, but on the phone you can find out a little bit more of, actually, there's a nugget that leads to something. And the last thing, which is probably the most important, is just getting out of the way and not being a filter, because if no one wants to hear, I learned this very early on in comedy, is that if you're booking 20, 30, 40, 50 comics, no one wants to see the same voice over and over again. So it's really about stepping out of that and, like, no ego, and just letting them rise on their own, and just maybe giving them some pointers of what to trim, but really at the end, just getting out of the way.
Yeah, makes sense. We're gonna switch it over to Ben now. So Ben, you've worked on choose your own adventure type of content for Netflix, like You vs. Wild, which we saw up there, and WWE Escape the Undertaker, which, by the way, is just gold. Such gold.
Thank you.
So I'm wondering, how do you go about directing interactive stories like this, where people can decide what comes next themselves?
Yeah, I think, I've done quite a bit of interactivity, which is always fun and challenging. A lot of people always want to know about kind of the technical aspects of it and how it's put together, but I think, one thing that's universal with all of us up here is we're all storytellers. So I think for me, it always starts with the story, right? We all work in very different mediums. In these cases, interactivity just happened to be, how I channeled these stories. So to me, that's the most important part. I think if you're going to kind of shoehorn a story into a certain type of storytelling, whether it's a podcast or whether it's an NFT or whether it's interactivity, you could potentially be setting yourself up for failure. So to me, it's always just staying true to, like, what's the story I want to tell. And then if it does happen to be something that warrants interactivity, then you just kind of get in the weeds and just really take advantage of what that platform has to offer, which in the case of interactivity is like telling multiple stories or multiple versions of a story. And that's the most exciting part about it to me, is it's rare that you get a chance to tell, a certain story multiple ways.
Yeah. My favorite part is that you can unchoose also your choice, which is like would be great for life, but that's
Yeah. Well, and it's also, you're kind of, I've found in a lot of cases, especially with Bear, for those that are Bear Grylls fans, is people also just to like torment him. So there's actually some like Easter eggs in some episodes where if you make literally every wrong decision, you'll have to play it and find out, but you can really like torment him. So, yeah.
That's
It's like
hilarious.
some sections of my life. But
Jason, hi.
Hi.
Hello. How are you?
I'm well.
You're diving into a whole new sector of the internet with NFTs. So can you tell us a little bit more about how you're using immersive storytelling and creating a gamified literature experience with the Lost City of Andromeda?
Sure, yeah. So I think you said something really important, Ben, talking about what kind of makes sense. And so it wasn't like NFTs or the blockchain or any of that. It was how does that dynamic work in the story? So like we already had a digital coin. Like I already wrote one into the story before I really knew anything about crypto. So that's kind of where it started. But I want to throw the term NFT out of the window because a lot of people don't know what that means. So I want to really simplify and just ask, who likes being rewarded for reading? Right, reading is fundamental. Who would have collected a wand from Harry Potter or a lightsaber back when Star Wars first came out? Like everybody, okay. So we're just making those things digital. So what you actually can do in our ecosystem is that you can collect it now when we're starting rather than later when it's already popular. So being able to be rewarded for reading, where you're able to collect technology, which is artifacts, alien relics, you can even collect characters and actually play to get those characters into future stories. So that's where the gamified literature experience comes in, and you get rewarded as you read through the novel. So there's different artifacts that correlate to different sections of the story.
Yeah,
so that's
so
how we're,
cool.
yeah.
The artwork is out of this world stunning.
It's
like I don't
incredible.
know who you're using, but it's
Thank
just
you.
like whew.
Yeah.
A different form of artwork. This one is for Steven. So you served as the supervising director in Monsters at Work, very recent, which is exciting. How did you approach this for animated streaming series compared to your approach for features, such as your work writing and directing on Meet the Robinsons, which, by the way, congrats on the 15-year anniversary. Meet the Robinsons,
Thanks
like
for-
no joke right there. But, yeah, so what are the major differences between a streaming series versus a feature for you?
Yeah, it's really fascinating because I was at Disney feature animation for quite a few years and developed a lot of feature-length stories over that time. And you get so excited about the stories you're telling and the characters and the worlds, and you build these stories, and then you find yourself at a place where you have to spend a lot of time talking about what do we have to take out of the movie to fit into our running time? Because you have with a movie, you've got a very finite amount of time to tell your story. But what's cool about this more serialized storytelling that's happening now these days is that you can still have an overarching narrative, but you can take a little more time to let your world breathe and your characters breathe. And you could, if you have 10 episodes, you could, on episode 3, maybe you pause your narrative and you go off on a little tangent and you talk about some backstory that happened before the show started, and then you hook back into the narrative and you continue with that. Or you pause and let's just do an episode where we explore the average day of our cast of characters. No plot, no just character. And then you can get back to the narrative. In a movie, I'm sure many of you have sat in theaters and seen movies that are like that and go, oh my God, would you please get on with it? The way we watch movies, we expect a certain pace, we expect a certain amount of plot and structure and momentum, but I think the way we watch these limited series or serialized entertainment these days, we actually expect to see more world, more characters. We want to live in those worlds and get to know those characters, and so I think it's less about plot these days and more about world and character. That would be my...
Yeah, kind of get to sit in it a little bit more.
Yeah, get to enjoy it, explore
That's
it.
lovely. Yeah.
Harold, this next question's for you. Can you tell us more about why you funded FlickerLab and what you're doing now with the Climate Ad Project?
well, FlickerLab really came out of my 3 obsessions in life, like I think everyone up here, storytelling, which I think is really intrinsic to being human, right? That's how I think what a human is we create a story out of these moments of consciousness and pretend we're a person. And I think that that's what we do. Some of us then go a little step further and want to tell those stories and are obsessed with getting people to listen to us, which also puts us on things like panels. The second is really technologies and platforms and how those intersect with storytelling. And that's been something I've been obsessed with my entire life. And learning how stories can reach people, how those technologies and platforms change the stories we're telling. And the third obsession really is how can we use those first 2 to slow down and hopefully prevent humanity from destroying all life on Earth, right? And that is, the sharp end of that stick is climate change. Now, through the 23 years that I've had the studio, because of the world changing and the world impact focus of the media I do, although I do a lot of other just entertainment things as well, I've really been focused on how do we build up platforms where we can take control of the storytelling, where we can reach people without mediators that are the networks and different platforms that are out there. How can we do that? And I'd say I'm probably on my concurrently 5th through 10th attempts to do that. It's hard. And particularly when you're taking on industry, the fossil fuel industry, which literally spends billions of dollars to shut down conversation about that, it's particularly hard. So for 12 years, I've been trying to build up a platform, and then I saw, honestly, a tweet from a climate scientist named Peter Kalmus at NASA that said, we need to build a platform to tell stories about climate and change the way people are thinking, because if you're not freaked about climate, hang out with a climate scientist for a day. I guarantee you they are more terrified than you. And when I say terrified, I'm not exaggerating, I'm underplaying it. They are often up at night, sweating, thinking about their children, and wondering why people aren't listening, right? So we decided to focus on comedy. And that's really what Climate Ad Project, it's not only comedy, but I think comedy is really critical, and I love comedy, but also it kind of is a end sneak around our confirmation bias, where we tend to just believe what we already believe. A laugh is a good way to break that open.
Yeah.
So it's about 1.5 years in now, and we are trying to build a platform, or building a platform, a global platform of being able to do really regular communication to try and break the narrative of an industry that is literally throttling yours, your kids, your grandkids, iffy. And I wish I was exaggerating, but that's why we're using comedy, because it's hard to tell that message without the occasional laugh.
Yeah. No, it takes a lot of courage to just click on a video that you're like, I'm deciding to be anxious today. So it's nice to have that comedy to be like, I'm learning, but not going to be in an anxious mood all day.
And we think hope is incredibly important. Hope,
Yeah.
hope and
Absolutely.
optimism is incredibly important in the face of it, or we paralyze ourselves.
Yeah.
Right, and we appreciate, obviously, like you dedicating your platform and everything to that. I think that's so important. Someone has to.
We all have to.
We all have to.
Do you mind if I jump? Sorry, I just wanted to comment on that, because you talked about 2 specific things, world and character, and then you talked about breaking through kind of the noise when it comes to like the gatekeepers and networks and stuff. So that's why I think like blockchain technology and digital assets are really interesting, because we do give people access to world and characters in a completely different way. As you saw like in the video, for example, a lot of the things that are in there you can actually collect, right? And then we're talking about breaking through barriers. We can actually build communities around these digital assets and reach people in a way that we never really could before, because we were waiting for permission from someone else to actually share. So
And get them invested.
yeah, exactly.
The Wild West.
Yeah.
Wild West, guys.
Wild West.
We meant it when we said it. All right, let's. This one is to Raul over there. Oh, sweet Raul. Hello. First of all, congrats, Raul, on the recent Oscar win for Dune.
Academy Award winner Raul Vega.
Seriously, congrats. I know you worked really hard on that film. So.
Thank you.
But Raul, you have ventured into a different aspect of storytelling through the use of podcasts. Can you tell us more about why you chose the audio route, and about Swiss and Lali, which we're in as well. So, but we've I mean, we've been so excited to be a part of it, and of course, the nights of wine and pizza before recording were always very fun as well. But yeah, can you tell us why you decided to go the audio route of storytelling?
Sure, thank you. Well, I'm a composer and a musician at heart, and for the last 10 years I've been a digital instrument designer for the now 2-time Oscar-winning composer Hans Zimmer. And it was really at his studio and under his mentorship that it's beyond everything else that you can imagine you can learn there, is that at the end of the day, sound is story. And that resonates with me so deeply. And I had gotten into podcasting probably around 2016, listening to kind of the, NPR shows, This American Life, FlickerLab, all that. But I was like, where are the movies for your ears? Where's the cinema for the brain that you can just listen to? And so I decided, well, I have no business exploring this place, so I may as well jump in and try to make something. So that's what I did, and the first show was Rose Drive, and it's a neo-noir mystery thriller of sorts, and it kind of gave me that excitement to really delve into the world of imagination. I think when you're watching a visual medium, you're kind of experiencing a collective group of people's imagination unfold before you, but when you're restricted to audio only, you have to be responsible for the imagination that happens inside your mind, and it makes it an entirely new and personal experience for every human being that's experiencing it. I thought, just what a cool way to kind of build movies inside of your brain. And in 2020, at the very beginning of the pandemic, we're all freaking out and we're all terrified. So, I don't know about y'all, but I was watching a lot of cartoons and a lot of comedy stuff, and I just thought, I need to make something from afar that we don't have to get people together, we can just do in the audio space. And I came up with this idea. I was like, well, what about these two idiots who take over Hollywood by becoming accidental con artists, also that they can retire at a beach house in Malibu? And that's the whole plot. And the first two people I thought, I was like, well, I might as well call two of my best friends, Aparna, Brielle, Kristin, Couture, and now we have Swiss and Lali Hijack Hollywood. And it was just a fun project to do that we were able to do without any restrictions of budget or studio time. Everybody recorded from home. And again, we just kind of got to bring something to light to people that could kind of turn their brain off for a little bit. But ultimately, I think there's so much power and things that we can learn from just immersing yourself in audio and new ways to kind of re-trigger the imagination that at some point when we got older we were encouraged not to use as much anymore, except for us, because this is how we make our living, is using our imagination in storytelling. So.
But yeah, it's also nice for, I don't know how many LA locals are here, but podcasts are very nice for traffic and just having something to listen to. It's nice to have the different options on how you want to listen to stories. Because there's just so many different things. Chores, it's like having it in the background. And yeah, and we're happy to be a part of it. There's nothing better than creating art with your friends. It is the best. Shall we move? We have questions for the whole panel now. It's kind of...
JP, we're going to start with you and go down the line, but everyone gets a chance to answer this one. So what do you all think is the next big trend or evolution in terms of storytelling?
Gosh, I think that this is probably a better question for Jason. I'm fascinated by the NFT space and the interactive space that Ben was talking about, because I grew up on Choose Your Own Adventures. I would actually unchoose my bad decisions in the book, so it's good to know that there is that option. But I think that's the interactive and also maybe more of an audience play of like actually you're in the world with other people. I find that fascinating. But.
Yeah, agreed. I think going back to what I said before about world and character, it feels like people really want an immersive experience. They want to, I'm thinking of VR, thinking of video games that are out today, thinking of all the theme park experiences these days that are really all about, we're going to build this completely immersive world so that you can feel like you are leaving reality 100% and going into this fantasy world. I think it's just going to be people wanting to not just experience stories, but be a part of those stories and participate in those stories and have an effect on those stories.
For me, the frontier I'm probably most interested in is who is telling the stories. And there are so many voices that are severely underrepresented, and we're seeing small progress on some fronts. but when you look globally and the issues that we're facing, and that's one of the things, for probably the thing that most excites me is the possibility for a climate ad project, is building a network that's global of storytellers, media makers, to create a network that actually can respond to the incredible power and wealth that's being used to silence those voices. And how can we use our position of, my position of privilege here, being me and who I am and how I grew up in this country, to amplify, to cultivate, to network, to help bring those voices up. So that's probably the frontier that I'm most involved in. I'm interested, and I'm gonna pigeonhole you later because I have some very complicated and ideas about NFTs and on the climate side and a lot of things.
Yeah.
I'm also being pulled, I'm not gonna go into it because I'm being pulled into a project that's very good, that's for good, very good, and being funded by NFTs. And that's the whole point of those NFTs. So I think that that's a very complex area, and I think that as we start to look at the impact of the technologies and what we do, I think that there's a terrain, and I can feel your spirit very strongly, and I feel like you're an ally in how do we make that space not be just about con artistry and climate destruction, which is where it came out of, but there's a lot of enormous possibility there that I'm being forced to look at instead of just simply ranting and raving against it, which I've spent some time doing. And will continue to do, I will be honest, but I feel your spirit and I think you are an ally in trying to define what that space can be to do something extremely positive and powerful as well.
Yeah, I can speak to that quickly because I actually got into a nice Twitter rant with some people just kind of, but I was really wanting to hear, like, what are your concerns? For me, the future of storytelling is actually equity and inclusion. And, for me, being, at the intersectionality of gay and Black, I always wanted to tell stories and I didn't know what that would actually look like. So there are a lot of people like me that want to tell stories and don't know if it's possible. And so when I think about, this digital asset NFT project, it's actually giving people the opportunity to tell stories as characters, maybe from the world that I've built, but it's themselves. Like the container is there, it's kind of like this reality, but it's another reality that they can be themselves in. And that's what I think the future of storytelling is. And by owning those characters and owning those assets, they actually will have value, like financial value, which we don't have access to a lot of times because that's gatekept too. So there's the environmental part. My book is about the end of the world, actually, and a culmination of natural disasters. So very aware, there's a countdown. I'm totally aligned with you. And figuring out how to deploy a project like this responsibly as we're educating people about like the end of the world and what equity and inclusion means in this future landscape of storytelling that is decentralized or not so controlled by everybody else or the networks and the money.
Yeah, I think to kind of combine, I feel the same with everything that's been said thus far. All kind of combining it together to me is what the future of storytelling looks like. I think definitely nailed it with immersion. I think stories are getting more and more immersive in different ways, and I'm big in the NFT space as well, and that's can be very immersive. But I don't think that's the only way. Like another way to look at that might be something, to your point, like a podcast where you're taking away all other senses in a way, and you really have to fill in the blanks yourself and be a part of the story. So I just think that as the technology advances and as the barrier of entry, to be able to tell stories, I just think there's going to be a really interesting and fun and creative explosion of doing different types of stories. To your point, because it's becoming easier, or it's becoming more accessible to tell stories for people that haven't been able to in the past. And I also think the second part of that is it's just going to be more symbiotic, right? Like there's just much more interaction with people, fans of stories, fans of characters, fans of all different types of aspects of storytelling, right? Like I imagine most of you are here because this is immersive, right? And it's somewhat symbiotic. In nature to be here and just be a part of stories and storytelling. So to me, to me it's immersion, and it's just that relationship that's hopefully more of a two-way street in the future.
I mean, I got nothing. They all said all of it right now. So- no, but I think truly the word you said that resonates with me is accessibility, you know, and this ability to reach people, and that the line is open, there's communication. And whether you do it through Choose Your Own Adventures or podcasts or whatever it is, let your audience, let your fans be a part of the story. You're all part of the narrative, right? And it makes you a culprit in the end result of what it is, for better or for worse. But I think we've created ways now that we can connect in ways that we obviously weren't able to the last 5, 10, 15 years. And the more open that line of communication is between creators and fans, the more interesting stuff I think can happen.
So I'm speaking about this from the branded side. I don't ever have the luxury of having hours to tell a story or full series or seasons. I sometimes have 60 seconds or 6 seconds. So I think a big trend though that I'm seeing happening in advertising and the branded side now is that the length and the trustingness of the viewer is starting to swing back. The pendulum is starting to swing back. I sit through seminars on how to keep your eyes on screen for the first 0.2 seconds because you're gonna swipe away. So how can I create something compelling that you're not gonna just push to the next item? And I'm tasked with creating content that is going to both tell the brand story, make you interested in purchasing, and continue to watch and drive you to go somewhere and purchase something. And to do all of that, plus tell you a story, it's difficult as well, because we sit and we agonize over what kind of couch this character should sit on and what shade of blue will make you want to buy this item. And it becomes quite oversaturated, and you guys can tell that we're not trusting you. So now I'm starting to see a lot more where I'm seeing long-form content being created by advertisers, but the brand doesn't need to be in there. I'm working on a long-form project with Samsung with a prolific director right now that they don't even want the product in there. They just want to sponsor it. And we did our first branded feature last year, and they just said, just write a story and we'll fund it. And if we all remember, Amazon used to just sell books, and now they're telling branded stories and films and television. So on my side of things, I'm really feeling the trend is that it's gonna go back into your court, because there's so many different ways that you can consume content and listen to stories. So I'm hoping at least as well that you guys will start to be trusted more by the advertisers and by the brands, so you can just enjoy these stories and listen to them and maybe buy it or maybe keep on swiping, but that seems like where it's going from my end.
It is nice that these days it's so much easier to know what the audience is looking for, what the market's looking for. I mean, it's very easy to even see your comments on YouTube and our Instagrams, and it really helps all of us as storytellers. It's lovely.
And I think, can I just add something else on that? And I think kind of something you were getting at with just the like not even showing a product in your content is, I hope the direction of storytelling is getting back to like respecting your audience. Like that's a big thing for me, is just really respecting your audience and letting them come on the journey with you. And if you're telling a good enough story, like they're gonna fill in the blanks, right? If you're doing your job. So I'm seeing a similar trend, and I think it's awesome because I just, I think it was referenced earlier in terms of being at a movie and you're just like, can this move on? And you're just like, you're being told what's happening, right? As opposed to seeing what's happening or hearing what's happening. So, I would for sure tack that on to like my hope for the future of storytelling.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. So a different question, and actually let's start at the end with you, Rebecca, again. I like this one a lot. What was the moment you all felt like you made it as a creator and a storyteller?
Oh, geez.
Can you think of a singular the first moment?
I think it evolves daily for me. I think some days I feel like I'm on top of the world, and some days I feel like I'm irrelevant because it's such a crowded space. I don't think I have a particular moment. I think every day there's highs and lows in this industry. It can look fantastic optically from the outside, but I think once you're in it, there hasn't ever been one moment. I hope that I do have one moment. I think that always wanting to strive for something next kind of keeps me going. There's successes to be had along the way, but I don't think I have one pinnacle moment.
I would say it's when I got my first review for my first podcast that was not reviewed by my mother. Best feeling in
That's
the
above an Oscar too.
That is far beyond any Oscar you could think of. I'm not even kidding. That is literally that because
I'm with you. I'm with
yeah,
you.
it's
that your mother likes your podcast.
It is. But it's also really cool when you get an email or a message or just a little ping from somebody who's, you know, in Nebraska somewhere who you have no connection with that says, hey, you made something kind of cool, I enjoy it. And that was enough for me to just say, well, I guess I got to keep doing this. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I feel similar to what both of you just stated. It's like I don't really feel like I've like made it yet, or of course I enjoy some victories and you should, that's one thing. Any of you, everybody in here is creative, and I'm sure just whether you're a painter or tell stories the way we do, like that anguish of just trying to get what's in your head out to the world, is tough. So you should for sure take time to appreciate your work. I have had moments where I think it wasn't even necessarily a tangible moment where it was an aha moment. It was more or less like looking back at something I had just created, and for me it was recognizing that I had pulled off what I intended to do, right? So, and something I strive to continue to do, because that part feels good. Whether somebody else appreciates it the way I do or not, I just know that I was able to express myself in the way I intended.
Honestly, right now, like, this is the moment, like, sitting up here with all of you amazing, talented storytellers and all of, you in the audience that are huge fans of comics, sci-fi, fantasy, speculative fiction, all of that. Like, this is being present, like, this is the moment, which is awesome. But another key moment was last year after I published 2050 Z, Time and Salvation. I saw a random tag from a person on Instagram who had was reading my novel, and in the middle of it posted about how it was bringing her out of depression, and that she hadn't been reading in a long time. Her Instagram handle was literally so-and-so reads, and was just really reflecting on how it made her feel, and all the things that she was combating, and how it helped her kind of address those things. So that moment, similar to you, it was like, wow, I actually did what I intended to do, was create something that allowed people to experience themselves inside of it. And I was like, I must do everything I can to move this forward, because I don't know the impact. I don't even know what goes on beyond what I can see, so.
I actually realized there was one, and it was actually pretty critical in my development, I think, as a storyteller, which was a year after I opened my studio. I did a cartoon in Michael Moore's Bowling for Columbine. I was at Cannes. I just listened to a stadium of 2,000, a theater of 2,000 people laughing outrageously at my cartoon. There was a standing ovation for 10 minutes for the film. About 2 hours later, I got a call from Michael. We had been writing an animated feature film together. It was greenlit by Canal Plus. I'm like, I know I'm not supposed to curse. Genius, right? 1 year into the studio, and then the next 3 years was for a series of random things, that deal slowly falling apart. And it put me into a very deep depression, because I was at the top of the world, and what that actually taught me, at least, was you have to separate the outcome from the making. Because that 3 years, by the end of that, in the middle of that, I was literally one person sitting in a room, was my studio, and I had to build it up from the ground. There was also September 11th and a few other things you may have heard of that had the impacts on the industry. And I really detached from it, and you had to. And I realized that I'm never going to control the outcome. I'm never going to control the impact. And that would have been a very interesting road had we made that. I would have had a very different career. And I spent a lot of time during the beginning period thinking about that, and then I realized, no. All you can do if you're going to be resilient and be in for the long run, and I've spent pretty much every day of the last 30 years, and I feel like I'm just starting to figure out what I'm doing, right? If you're going to be in it for the long run and realize you can't attach to that idea of success beyond, I think, the fact, am I doing a story that's sincere to me, that it has meaning to me, that then is going to find an audience, whether it's 1 or a billion, that it has an impact on, that you can hold on to. The outcomes you can't, and you will be very short in this world if you hinge your well-being and your storytelling on an idea of success that's external. It's much more intrinsic, that I've got to tell stories There's a lot of drivers about why I need to tell stories. I'm going to tell those stories, and I'm going to look for 1, 10, 100, 1,000 ways to do it. I'm going to try and invent things, platforms, and I'll fail. And if I really think of it, I look at the last 30 years, it's like daily failure, right? That's what being a storyteller on some level is. Some will get wealth and fame, some won't. Let it go. Let it go 100%. Focus on the storytelling, being resilient, and I plan, knock on wood, my success is, do I get to keep telling stories until the day I die? That's really the beginning and the end of it. And I hope, and I know some of the things I've done, I did an animated series teaching kids how their body works. It's in 30,000 classrooms. You've never heard of it unless you happen to be in one of those classrooms. I spent money, I lost money making it, but kids laugh and learn about their body. And I love it. So that's probably one of my most successful properties, but I'm never gonna be famous for it. I'll never make a dime on it. I love that it's out there, and every day there's this goofy little purple guy teaching them something in a way that is how I wanted to learn when I was a kid and didn't get that way. So.
Yeah,
That's great. I'll just tell a quick little, pardon me, anecdote. I remember as a kid, I loved all the coffee table books about Disney and Disney art and Disney animation, and I would devour those. And there was always photos of the old days with Walt and all his story artists, sitting around with their storyboards all hung up on the walls and pitching, and it just looked so cool, but it also looked really unattainable for me. It was something that I thought would be great to do someday, but I never knew how to get there. Fast forward a bunch of years, and I was there. I was at Disney. I was storyboarding on The Emperor's New Groove, a film that came out a few years ago. And I was splitting a sequence, the climax of the movie, with a friend of mine, Don Hall. He and I were storyboarding the sequence. And we were pitching for the first time to the director. We had all our storyboards hung up, tons of storyboards. It was a really long sequence. And I remember just before the director came in, kind of looking around going, oh my gosh, I'm in a room with my storyboards hanging up on the wall, and I'm about to pitch. And that was really cool for me, so.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And of course, we all love The Emperor's New Groove.
Yeah, Emperor's.
By far one of the best.
Last but not least.
Gosh, I think I'm working a little bit of a different format than most of the panelists here in terms of I worked on for 13 years a daily show in front of a live audience, so the feedback was instantaneous in terms of whether you thought something, you put your work into something for so long. Sometimes some of these segments would take, with stand-up comics, could take 2.5 years, 3 years, 4 years to curate and find the right jokes to put on the air, and you believe it, and you believe in the person, and you put them out there, and then I am standing 10 feet away from them with the audience right behind us, being judged right away. So I never had the moment to really kind of get too high on my horse, because as soon as I did, I was knocked down really quickly. But I would say that some of the best, what made me kind of encourage me to keep going was knowing that I had maybe inspired or helped inspire someone. And so there were comics that have come up to me and said that they started comedy because they saw somebody that I put on the air, and that to me makes that makes it all worthwhile.
Yeah.
So that sort of makes me go, okay, well, doing something right. So
Yeah, that's lovely. Yeah, we only have time for one more question.
And this is for everyone. We're going to go right back down. So JP, we're starting with you again. So in one sentence or less, what advice would you give to audience members looking to enter the entertainment industry?
believe in yourself.
Yeah.
That's one sentence. I would.
Yep, that's a good one.
There we go.
Solid sentence.
Excuse me, I would say get comfortable and with collaboration and enjoy that process, because it's very rare that you're doing it alone. So enjoy the collaborative process.
I mean, I think I kind of did it before, but I think it's tell your stories for you, be resilient in finding ways to do it, and know that failure is part of the journey.
Oh gosh. I would say start.
That's good.
That was even better. That was a word, guys. He didn't even need a whole sentence.
I'd say ST. That's shorter than one word. I would say we all know the world can be tough. This industry can be very tough. I would say take what you do. This is my one sentence. I would say take what you do seriously, but don't take yourself too seriously.
I would say do not ever give anybody else power to give you permission to create. Just do it.
If you can quit, you should, and if you can't, you will find success.
Yeah, absolutely. Have courage. It's a habit that gets better over time, for sure. Yeah, that is the conclusion.
Yeah, it looks like that's all the time we have today. Thank you so much to our panelists, JP, Raul, Rebecca, Ben, Jason, Harold, Steven, for being here with us today to discuss your incredible work. We had so much fun. This was
Yeah.
really great.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
And also a big thank you to Impact 24 PR and WonderCon for putting this panel together, and to all of you for joining us. We were so happy to see you out here.